Yep, it's running.
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to wherever you are, people that are here. Thank you very much for coming out for our first meeting in 2024. As you probably have noticed in the absence or vacuum that's been existing since November last year, we're in the process of restructuring uh, the Gemquest program, and we've moved at the moment away from being using Jolion Paul as our Zoom coordinator, and we're very happy to have the cooperation and support from Dr. Clemens Schwarzinger, who is a professor at the Johannes Kepler University in Linz, Austria. So we're thank you very much for your support and your involvement. You've been a godsend to this program, and we're looking into the near future, hopefully, to have a YouTube channel, hopefully just for Gemquest. We'll see that hopefully when that happens, we'll let everybody know. And we're also hoping possibly to be involved with University of Arizona, but we're going to see how that goes. So we'll have at least one university in the background helping us disseminate information about gemology through the program. So what's happening today is we're going to be having a talk given by our host, Dr. Schwarzinger, about photography of gemstones. And this is a particular curse for me because I have never really been able to successfully get all the facets the way I want them to be, or looking into the stone and the depths of the stone as I want to be. And so rather than tell us how to do it with extremely expensive equipment and very complicated processes, I have to admire and value this approach that Dr. Schwarzinger will share with us about how he does his gem photography. And I've seen his pictures and they are amazing. So I think he's up there with all the best in terms of photography, but he's not just a good photographer and a good professor and a good teacher. He also was one heck of a good gem cutter because the AGTA has given him the honor of being a grand master cutter. And you don't get that easily. I only know one other person who got that, and that was Stephen Kotlowski. I may be incorrect in that, but that's the only one I know of. So we're dealing with some very rarefied atmosphere in terms of Dr. Schwarzinger, and he's actually a very talented man. So we're grateful for his involvement and his support. And so I'd like to, with no further additional introduction, just ask Dr. Schwarzenegger he could introduce and take forward his program on gemstone photography today. And thank you so much for giving us your time, everybody that's attending, and Dr. Schwarzenegger as well. Thank you.
Thank you for the kind introduction. A couple of things I have to correct. First of all, there are not plenty. There are a couple of Grandmaster gem cutters in the USFG, so that's not just 2 or 3. There are a couple of those, and I might have heard it wrong, but you named me Schwarzenegger, so that's the other guy from Austria.
No, not Schwarzenegger, Schwarzinger. Yes. Although you got the muscles, you know.
Not enough. So let's try to start this here. And here's another one, and I hope that everybody can see now my slides. Okay, I have to move this to a minimum because that's always detracting me here. Okay, so yeah, I've given this talk on gemstone photography at the USFG this February in Tucson, and Ray asked me to give it here in this Gemquest society as well. And it is my pleasure to share my knowledge. I usually keep saying that to learn cutting a stone takes you maybe a year or 2. Learning how to do the photography right might be even longer. And I've got some very valuable tips from other people, and sometimes I can't remember who it was. So sorry for not giving everybody the credits, but at least I can share everything that I have learned. And I hope that some of the tips that I can give you are of any help for you and for your gemstone photography if you do it. So now let's see. Yeah, this is how we start. I mean, this is nothing more than a nice stone. It is a USFG Grandmaster stone, 97 or something points. So the stone is very nicely cut, but the photo is ugly. What you can see here is the background. The background is more or less dominating the whole picture because there's lots of structure. We have here the shadow, which is from the mobile phone, and the stone, well, yeah, not really anything. So what I will try to talk to you about is going from here to here. So this is what a picture should look like. You see all the definitions. You have a smooth background. You have nice sharp edges on the girdle. You see everything in focus. Depending on the taste, of course, you can have a little bit of a reflection here and there. And this is one thing that I have to say from the beginning. All of my photos are not photoshopped. I mean, I do use Photoshop from time to time, but mostly to remove any dust that is sometimes unavoidable. For example, if you ever tried to clean tourmaline, you will have realized that the more you clean it, the more sticky to dust it becomes. This is one of the inherent properties of tourmaline, for example. Now, let's talk about this presentation today. I'll talk a little bit about positioning of the gem and the camera and how they both interact. Of course, lights. Lights is one of the most important things that we have to consider. Using backgrounds, there are good backgrounds, there are bad backgrounds, where is the border? And also I want to, well, show you at least the difference between a digital single reflex camera, or what I have moved to now, a mirrorless camera, or using the mobile phone. I mean, mobile phone, there are from two. I mean, you can have an old Nokia with buttons on it, and you can have a Samsung, I don't know the numbers, 24, 25, whatever they have, or the iPhone, I think 16. Don't get me wrong on this. I stick to my phones for a couple of years, so I don't know what the newest ones are, but they're an option that everybody can easily use. The difference between the good and the very good picture might be the lighting or the surrounding you set your stones in. Now, let's start with the equipment that I have. I don't have a fancy photo studio. I just have a small light box. This is this white curtain-like material, which is in a wireframe that has exchangeable backgrounds. Here we have a black one. You can have a white one, a green one, whatever you want. I have a couple of light sources here to the left and to the right, very powerful daylight equivalent light sources. There's one that you cannot see here. You can see it a little bit here in the reflection, which is mounted on top of the box. And I have two light sources here in front. Why do I have two? Because they have different temperatures. This is, for example, one that is almost daylight temperature, and this one is an old tungsten wire bulb. So it's more like candle light. The equipment that I'm using, or what I recommend to use, is to have a nice camera. I mean, very often people talk about megapixels. It's so important to have so many megapixels. Well, it depends. If you want to have your photographs in the internet, Instagram, Facebook, things like this, you don't need lots of megapixels. So I was doing most of my work with an old Nikon D90, which has something like 8 megapixel, and it's still okay. If you want to put your stones or the photographs of your stones on a skyscraper, for example, to have, well, something like Times Square illumination, then you need a couple of megapixels. What I do have here is, except for the camera now, I have a sturdy tripod. This is very, very important. You have to invest a little bit in your tripod, otherwise it will start swinging and it takes you ages until your camera has a still picture. It will move because you have lots of levers in there that encourage the moving, and even, at least in my case, the floor is moving. So when you jump from one side to the other side, you will see it in the picture that it's moving. What else do we have? An XY movable stage. This is, of course, what you always would like to have. Everything should be under control. So I can move the camera here on this rail in both directions. This is to get, without having to change the position of the tripod, you can focus down and a little bit to the left and to the right, and you don't have to move around with all of your equipment. And what's also very important, which I have learned, is was helping me. I think one of the most helpful tools that I found from a friend is having an additional monitor. Because even if you have a camera like this, you have a 4 to 5 inch screen, and it may look sharp, but only if you see it in the computer afterwards, you see, damn, it's not really sharp, it's out of focus, and I have to redo everything again. If you have a large screen that's attached to the camera, of course, this is not possible with the phones, but with most of the cameras, you can attach the computer screen, and then you have it at 30 inches, 40 inches, whatever your screen is, and you get lots and lots of details. And don't forget, your stone might be something like half an inch or even smaller. If you blow it up to 30 inches, that's a huge magnification. So everything you see here is things that you do not see with the naked eye. Now let's start with the problem of the light. We have here a nice stone, looks like this in the dark. And of course, if it's a colored gemstone, we want to have some light on it. And you turn off the light on top of the stone and you see reflection. For example, here the table. The table is completely reflecting. And if you take a picture like this, you will see there's a dark colored zone and there's a strong reflection. This is almost white. So that the contrast is extremely different and you don't get the right color for these stones. You don't even get a nice picture. Of course, you can try to turn the stone around or move the light a little bit, but still you will find one of those facets that is reflecting. And then you have everything in nice illumination, but one white reflection. From time to time, it is nice to have this on purpose. For example, if you want to have all these symmetrical facets being illuminated. But then I typically try to have it not completely reflecting because then you just have white spots, but just to have them showing a little bit more of a reflection than everything else. It just shows you that you're perfectly in focus on your gem. So how can we avoid these strong reflections? Well, we use so-called diffusers. So a diffuser is something that takes the direction of the light. If you have a light bulb, the most of the light is going in this direction. I mean, it goes in all directions, but it hits your stone in just one direction. A diffuser is something that, as the name implies, diffuses the light, and we just put it around our bulb, and then we get the light diffused in all directions. So there's no sharp rays anymore coming to the stone, but you more or less get a softer light, and therefore you remove most of your reflections. You can do this with all of the light bulbs that you have, or as most people do, you can use one of those light tents. So these light tents, this is a very easy, simple version. You can find them on Amazon, whatever, any internet sources, starting with something like 20 to 30 bucks. In Tucson, they had a couple of booths selling those things, a little bit more sophisticated, I have to admit, but going up into the thousands of dollars. I think one was even $10,000 without a camera. Just the diffuser and some light sources. Maybe a movable table if you want to make videos of jewelry. But in most cases, this is what you need. So this is nothing less than, nothing more than a curtain, typically white, and it lets the light shine through, but it diffuses it. And this is what you want to have. You want to have equal illumination on all positions and on all spots in this light tent. So we have our light tent set up. You see here is on one side very strong light, on the other as well. Here you see the reflection from the top light. So this is an LED panel. The LED panel has its pros and its cons. You can adjust the light temperature. You can adjust also the intensity of the lights. You can play around a little bit. Now here we have the gem, and I just took a photo, and this is what we see. You still see that we have strong reflections on the left and on the right, and here on the top. This is because we still have these strong lights coming in from the sides and also from the top. Now you can play a little bit and tilt your gemstone, for example. Then you get rid of at least one side of the reflections, but then you can't shoot the gem centered anymore. So you get some side shots or things like this, which are very often also appealing, but I always try to have at least one shot that's directly from the front or directly through the table of the stone. Now, what I do to avoid this reflection is I just use a box of cardboard. So they can have any shape, any texture inside. This one, for example, is in the inside is white, has a little bit of a texture, and it now reflects everything from the inside, but blocks the strong lights from the outside. Unfortunately, so this is the light box. Unfortunately, here on the right, you already see the photo. This is now using the same settings that I did for the last photo. Of course, we block most of the light. Therefore, we lose the intensity. So the picture just gets dark. Of course, we can play a little bit with this f-stop and with the exposure time. I'll come to those two things we can play with a little bit later. But you see now we have an exposure time of 1/3 of a second. And this is one of the reasons why you need a sturdy tripod. You can't use a handheld camera or anything and hold it for a 1/3 second, half a second, not even a 1/10 of a second. You will see movement and you get blurred pictures. So what we get is now a nice picture. There's no reflections around, but if you look closely, you will see the stone is greenish blue, but we have some, let's say, flesh-colored parts here. And you know what those come from? This is practically a reflection of myself. This is, I'm standing here behind the camera using it's a handheld device for exposing the camera. I don't know the proper name, sorry for this. It's like a radio control, but with a cable. And therefore, I'm standing behind, and the stone picks now up everything that's in front of it, including the camera lens, which is the so-called head shadow that we're seeing. This is maybe a little bit the dark part here, and also myself. And this is, for example, a thing that's very well known to diamond graders. You shouldn't wear a yellow shirt or a pink shirt if you're grading diamonds, because you get the reflections in the stone. Now, in order to get rid, first of all, of my reflection and to get more light into the stone, I'm using this part here. So this is a reflector, and it reflects now one of the two bulbs that I have here beneath the surface of my setup. So we have the light reflecting here in this direction and bouncing back from this. This is a piece of paper. It's as simple as this. You just have a piece of paper, you cut a hole that fits your lens, you mount it with some adhesive stripes, for example, and that's it. Costs you less than $1. Of course, you can have a professional reflector, you can have a curtain in front of the tent, for example, that does the same job, but this one is very well balanced, because it always is on the right angle towards the lens. So you get the reflections directly in the same direction. And now you see there's just the pure color of the stone, no more reflection from myself. And you see the patterns from the cutting here very nicely. The only thing that we still have to worry about is it's very in focus here at the cullet, but the other part is a little bit out of focus. The thing that I did change for this photo is just the exposure time. We're now down from 1/3 second to 1/60 of a second. So this is again something that makes sense. Talking about these two bulbs, remember those two that I have here, the daylight and the tungsten filament, you see that the gemstones react different to different light sources. I mean, in some cases, it's very well known. It's called color change gemstones. If it's less pronounced, we call them color shift. But almost every gem material and every other material as well will see a difference in the light source that you're using. So here we have the incandescent light bulb. You have a little bit of more reddish parts here, and the daylight equivalent has more of a white color to it. For some stones, it's a little bit more pronounced, like we have here in this color change garnet from Kantonga. It has a wonderful blue appearance. I mean, it is the most blue garnet I have ever seen and laid my hands on. It's 1.79 carats and now in the possession of the Somewhere Over the Rainbow collection. And you see with 4 different light sources, we have the blue, we have a little bit of a greenish, we have pink, and this not that intense blue. What you also see is that there's a change in the background. I mean, the background is always the same, the settings are all the same, it's just different light sources. And this is something where people start to complain, you know, but you have to bring this to the same temperature. Yes and no. If you bring it to the same temperature, then you have the background again gray, but then of course also the stone looks gray, because the light temperature is what makes the difference between candlelight, incandescent light, fluorescent light. So it's mostly the light temperatures. You cannot bring it together so they're all on the same background. If you see pictures of color changed materials on the same background, it's either too much light or it was done with Photoshop. So just crop your images and put it on a black background, for example.
Just a quick question, if I may, Dr. Clemens
Sure.
Schwarzinger, is that what is the temperature of near daylight that you're using?
This is close to 6,000.
Okay, so 5,600, 6,000, that sort of range?
5,600 to 6,500. I have a couple that go over 7,000, but rarely use this. Most of the time I'm using like 5,600 to 6,000.
Thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome. So in almost all cases, we prefer diffused light because diffused light removes all of the reflections. Here on the left side, you see a piece of rutile, titanium dioxide, which has a very, very strong sparkle. So it's way more than diamond. And to get an image of such stones is sometimes a pain in the ass, to be honest. So what I used here is lots of diffused light, and you see it looks a little bit blurry. I mean, there's still so many reflections, but you get rid of all these light effects. Everything is sharpened in focus, but it just doesn't look like it. So if you want to enhance these pictures with a little bit more reality-like, because if you take this stone in your hand, it will just sparkle. And sparkling is something that is induced by movement of light or the stone. And in a still picture, you cannot transport this message. So what you can do is you can use a point light source. In this case, I just used a simple torch and pointed the torch on some position. You just run around and try to find the ideal position where you have all of these sparkles distributed around the gem. I mean, if you have it from the top, you will just have the sparkles here or from the side. So you have to play a little bit. And this is 95% of the time that it takes me to take a picture is finding out the perfect position for the light sources. And if you use a pinpoint light, for example, then you see all of these light flashes. And this is one of the rare cases where you want to have a pinpoint light and not a diffused light. Okay, talking a little bit about technology and lens technology. So this is, of course, applies only to the DSLR cameras or the mirrorless cameras. We do have a so-called f-stop. So the f-stop means, or is more or less how much light gets into your lens. If you have a low number here, the f-stop is very low, then your lens is more or less completely open and lots of light can pass through. This also means that the exposure time that it takes to take a picture is very, very small. So 1/60th of a second, for example. If your f-stop is very large, then you close your aperture in the lens. You just have a very small, tiny hole, and therefore just a low amount of light is coming through, and you need long exposure times. And this also has an influence on the focus plane that you have. For example, if you have a very low f-stop, then you have a very narrow section only of your gemstone that will be in focus, or of everything. So it can either focus on the table, on the girdle, or on the culet. If those numbers get smaller and smaller, you just see very thin sections. This is one of the biggest problems in microphotography, for example. If you have these large lenses there, like 100 times or 200 times, you only see very, very thin sections of whatever you're trying to photograph. So the trick here is to use very large f-stop numbers, use long exposure times, and then you can, in most cases, bring all of your stone into focus. But of course, everything comes at a price. If you use the very low f-stops, then your picture is as crisp as it can be. If you use the large numbers here, then you get some blurry edges that come from the diffraction of the lenses, and then it comes into play how expensive your equipment will be. Because there are cheap lenses which cannot work with an f40, for example, and there are lenses that go a couple thousand euros or dollars upwards. They can deal with those values much, much better. And I've seen it. I had a good Sigma lens before the one that I have now, which was nice to go maybe to f10, f12, and you still get nice pictures without these black rims around the gemstones. Now with the new one that I have, a Nikkor lens, I can use f40 without any problems and still get wonderful pictures. So just to show you how the effect of the f-stop works, here we have an f-stop that's very, very low, 3.3, and here we just have the focus on the table. So the table is fully in focus, it's sharp, everything else is blurred. Doesn't look like a nice photo. On the other side here, we have the QLED fully in focus, everything else blurred. Also doesn't look like a nice photo. In the middle one, well, now we have the girdle, which is in focus, and neither the QLED nor the table are in focus. I would consider this the best of those three pictures, but still, it's not good. So as we have learned, we increase the f-stop, we lower the section in the lens that where light can pass through. And going to f11, for example, we see here fully in focus, also up to the girdle or down to the girdle, but the QLED is not in focus. But this is a nice picture. If we go to f22, we have everything in focus. We don't have any of these typical dark gray or even black halo or shadow around, which is indicating the diffraction limit of your lenses. And this is what I would consider a nice photo. Okay, everything is in focus, everything is sharp. You see all the details here from the cutting, which are a little bit blurred here. Of course, at the end, it all comes to taste. I mean, a couple of people prefer if it's not perfectly in focus, everything, because for me, this one looks a little bit more three-dimensional, and this one looks more like a two-dimensional, just as it would be plain. It doesn't have any depth. And of course, there's another technique that can be used. This is use focus stacking. So focus stacking is that you record pictures like those, where you have just one part of the gem in focus and the next part and the next part. And you take something between 5 and 20 photos, and then you use a software. There are a couple of freely or very cheap softwares available in the internet, and you do a focus stacking. So that means it just takes the part that is in focus, removes all the blurry parts. And then you have either this or this. So those ones have maybe a little bit more technical issues depending on the software that you're using. This one might have a little bit of a diffraction going around on the outside of the gem. Both in those cases, I would say, are very nice photos. So whatever you prefer, I mean, there's use for almost every technique there. And sometimes that's the problem. There's the need for every technique. We will find out that focus stacking is something, in some cases, we cannot avoid. Now let's talk a little bit about backgrounds. So background is, as the name says, it should stay in the back. It should not dominate your picture. But the right choice of the background is something that you have to consider. For example, if you look at this nice spinel here, to the left on a black background, to the right on a white background, would you say they both have the same color? This one looks red. This one looks a little bit pinkish, orangey pink. So this one looks brighter and this one looks darker. So if you have a white contrast, you always have brighter stones. If you have dark stones, for example, sometimes it works with a white background, sometimes they just look black. So you always have to balance what you use as a background. But you have to be aware that if you use a white or a black background, your photo will look completely different. It's very easy in a white background to just overexposure the gem, because the white, once it's white, it doesn't change anymore. It can't get whiter than white. It can only get darker. So you use whatever exposure time that you have or you like, and you can make your stone brighter and brighter and brighter without changing the background. If you do this here with a black background, if you increase the exposure time, your gem will become brighter, but also your background will become brighter and brighter and brighter. It's a question of taste again. What I'm using in most of the cases is a piece of stained glass. It's black stained glass. It always looks like gray because you remember the cardboard box. The cardboard box has a white interior, so it reflects some of the white onto the black, and therefore it looks a little bit like gray. What I like about this is that you have these reflections here of the gemstones. If the stone, if the glass is properly polished, there are no fingerprints or things like this on, and it's not really a mirror image, but it just gives you the idea that it creates three-dimensionality. You can also use a mirror, of course. The mirror, there you have to be very, very careful. The mirror must have its mirroring surface on the top surface, not on the bottom, but on the top surface. You will see it with glass. What's the reason why? And in this case, you get real reflections. Again, you have to be careful with the focus. Either you have this part in focus, then the reflection will be a little bit blurry, or you do focus stacking, or you increase your f-stop, then you can have everything in focus. Now, the mirror here on another gem gives you a perfect mirror image of your gem. If you use a simple piece of glass, then you will see multiple reflections, because you will have reflections from the top of the surface, from the bottom of the surface, and sometimes there's also a third reflection depending on the type of glass that you have. And the reason here is very often in mineral photography, you use some glass. It's a little bit too thick, but just to explain how it works. And you have a piece of background here, a cardboard, for example, that can be gray, blue, whatever background you want to have. Then you have your gem, you come here with the light, you get reflection from the surface of the gem to the surface of the glass and get this into the camera. And then you have reflection from the bottom of the glass and you have all those diffractions going on. Therefore, you create multiple images, which you can find very often in some of these gem pictures that people are posting. I find them a little bit disturbing. And this is what you really don't want, that the background will disturb your image. I mean, this image here, if we go back, the image is pretty much the same. But here you have a sharp mirror image, and here you have these triple images that look a little bit like blurred. And I think they distract from the piece itself. Yeah, going a little bit further with the backgrounds, a background that is in the background is nice. For example, here there's a piece of aluminum foil, a little bit folded, so we get some blurry reflections, we get a little bit of motion here, but we have the stone in the center, and it's still the centerpiece. So this is what I consider, this is a nice background. You can never go wrong with a black background that has some texture. It always depends on how much texture you have and how much you keep it in focus. For example, in the background that has a texture, you always see there's some part in the front which is out of focus, and there's some part in the back which is out of focus. You can use this to create nice images, but you have to be careful about this. If you want everything in focus, you have to do focus stacking, because this dimension is just too long to be covered by a single f-stop. Again, black with some texture, also okay. If we come to pictures like this, I mean, nice tanzanite on a blue background with golden wavy lines in the background. Yeah, you could do better, I think. Those last couple of pictures were all taken by my daughter, and I just told her, you know, play around. And she's also doing some painting, and this was one of her paintings. So the idea was not too bad, but just the color contrast is awful. You just have blue on blue. You should have another color of the gem, for example, here. So this for me is a background that's just too noisy. Here on the right, we have a nice gem, small gem, on a huge crystal of tourmaline. I mean, everything that you look at is the tourmaline. So there's only one reason for me to use this picture, because believe it or not, this and this came from the same pocket. So they are both mined in 2022, end of 2022, from the Tourmaline King mine in California. And this yellowish green was a piece of cutting rough, and this pinkish to bluish material is a huge crystal, which I just used as a background here for fun. Of course, you can also use a noisy background. But if you use a noisy background, make sure that the stone is still dominating the picture. So this is one background that has some golden sparkles on it, which I would not use for an ordinary gemstone. But in this case, it was just a couple of days before Christmas, and you think, you know, what can I do for Christmas? Let's make a Christmas card, gem cutter. Yeah, let's make the photo of a nice cut stone, which I call the snowflake. It's an aquamarine, and it has lots of pattern going on there. There's lots of contrast. And even the sparkles here in the background, which are evenly distributed, which helps us, do not really take the focus from the centerpiece. You still have the centerpiece standing out. So this is always a give and take, and you have to consider the same background can be wonderful for one gem, but it can be absolutely impossible for a second one. You always have to look at the combination of both. Yeah, I was inspired by Robin for this photo using the orchids. If you have an orchid as a background, I mean, it will dominate. So you need a strong, a powerful contrast. In this case, a peridot with a wonderful green color. It has to be really competing. So still, you have two focus points here. The one is the orchid and the other one is the gemstone, which is okay. And I was asked last time, why is there no reflection, or why is there a reflection or a shadow from the orchid here? Because you have some light from the top or from the light a little bit from the back, and the orchid is shielding everything from the gemstone. So you're blocking the light from the back and getting all the light from the front, but you still see this nice reflection here from the back light. Also, always a nice thing is to have rough and cut sets. So for rough and cut sets, you either do it with Photoshop, that you use the very piece of rough that you use to cut your stone, make a photo, and then afterwards you copy the gemstone into the photo. In this case, we had 2 gems and 2 other pieces of rough from the similar pocket, and I just had those placed in the back. Again, if the material is cut, it's more sparkly. It stays in the front. It's dominating the picture. And of course, here we have our focus. Everything is focused here on the gemstones, and the rough pieces, you see they're a little bit blurred in the back. So also a possibility to have nice photos. Really, a problem is if you have to photograph multiple gemstones in the same picture. I mean, the easy way is always take one picture of one gemstone and then copy it into a neutral background. This is always possible. But to make a real photo of a couple of gemstones proves to be rather complicated. There are some exceptions. For example, diamonds. This is a set of synthetic diamonds. And as we all know, all diamonds are cut to the same angles, to the same pavilion angles and crown angles. So if they are lying one after the other, and you have a focus from one position, all of those have the same focus. So they look like they're photographed from the top, and Ray asked me to mention this because this was not obvious, at least to the listeners at the USFG. Those stones are not mounted on the background, they're just lying on their sides. So we have them at an angle. This is also where the reflection comes from. It's a natural reflection, it's not photoshopped. So we have them lying on the sides and they're not fixed on the culottes. So therefore, you photograph them at an angle. So you have to find this angle, and if all are cut the same, then you will find one position where you have everything in center. Still, the one here is in the front, this is in the middle, and those are in the back. You have to use very long f-stop numbers in order to have everything in focus, or like in the next picture, oh, sorry, not this one. Let's go for this one first. If you have a couple of stones there, if you have larger groups, then you have to do the focus stacking. Now going back to those one, another thing that you can do is you can pair stones of similar color. Like those two are cut from the same piece of rough. These are green tanzanites. Just this one was cut along the c-axis and this was in parallel to the c-axis. So you see there's a little bit of difference in color. And this one is perfectly aligned. This one is almost perfectly aligned. But this, I have to admit, is a coincidence. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. So sometimes you just have to be lucky to get these nice shots. So again, back to the worst case where you have a colorless gem, a light yellow, a green one, a pink one. We have dark ones, we have blue ones, we have purple ones. So many, many colors in one picture, and you can only focus on an average value. For example, you can either have this one perfect in contrast, then everything else looks dark. Or you can have the dark one illuminated, then this will just shine as a white spot. So you have to play around and try to do your best. Still, if you compare, for example, these two gems with their single photos, you see this, I call it the ugly duckling, is wonderful if you give it a nice main shot or a headshot. We have the purple, we have the oranges. So this is a tanzanite cut along the c-axis, unheated. If you heat it, it will come to this dark blue color again. Or this one again, this Escher type cut only comes into to focus if you have the perfect position. But if you focus on this one, then everything else will look strange. So it's always a give and take, and you cannot make in a group photo everything look perfect, but you can try. And you know how I do it? I have tweezers and I start to push the tweezers here a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, and again starting from scratch because they start to roll, especially the round ones. So positioning the gems, positioning the light is 99% of the photos or the work that you have to do with photos. 1% more is just click and then going to Photoshop, maybe removing a couple of dust particles. The last thing I want to talk about is some nice additional tool that gemologists are very familiar with, polarization, and like a dichroscope. And we can use polarization filters also for cameras. There are different types of polarization filters. I'm, for example, using a circular decreasing, a circular polarization filter. And in general, what it helps is remove reflections, because reflections come from a directed light source, and polarization just is either in this direction or in this direction or in any direction. You just can turn it around and you block the reflected light. So you get rid of a couple of refractions, which is wonderful if you have a uniaxial gemstone, like a garnet, for example, because the color doesn't change. If you have, for example, tanzanites, one of my favorite stones, you already know this, you can create wonderful images. Like here on the left, we have how it looks like to the human eye. And then we have polarization in one direction and the other direction. You can highlight the different colors that come into play to mix up in this face-up view that you have normally. So we have here the blue zone, we have the greenish zone or yellowish, and we have the purple here. And this is just by turning the filter. You will also realize that the background changes. Again, with everything that has some directed light, you will lose or block part of this rays, and then it can look brighter or darker in the background. Also here another one, another of the tanzanites. This is the photo how it looks to the human eye without any polarization. This is polarization completely set to the yellow side, and here completely to the purple side, and those mix together to get these sometimes called mermaid tanzanites. Of course, one prerequisite to get such photos is that the cutting is perfectly along one of the axes. If you cut in between the axes, then you will have mixed images here as well. So the last thing I did promise was to compare a little bit, in my case, the iPhone 13 versus the mirrorless camera. So I was using, again, my light tent and placed this stone here. So this is a feldspar, Kiev triangle, another one of the Grandmaster stones I submitted. And you see, it is okay, the image. What we do see is a lot of greens that comes again from the clothing that I was wearing. So to be fair, we also use the piece of white paper that should block out my whatever shirt I was wearing there. If you know me, I typically wear very colorful shirts, so this is why the pictures would look like this. And here we have the reflected light, and without any of my shirt compartments, it looks not too bad, I would say. Unless, of course, you compare it with the mirrorless camera. The benefit here is the color is spot on with this one. This is a little bit too yellow. And one thing that people are very often struggling with the phones is that they use autofocus and auto exposure. So in most of the phones that I know, you can turn those off. So you turn off autofocus, auto exposure, then you have to move the camera to get into focus, and you just turn, well, afterwards, usually you turn the light to the position, or not to the position, to the value that you would have. It would also help in getting the picture, I would say, a little bit less yellowish, but still, yeah. The difference is the camera, I think it was also when it was new, something like $1,000, and this equipment is something like $3,500. So of course, a good camera always pays off. The question is, do you need it? If you have this on your Facebook page, on your WhatsApp page, it's good enough. Even better if you move it. If you take a movie, you see all the sparkles, you see the movement, then even I'm using my iPhone, still using the iPhone, because setting up the camera for videos just takes too much time, and then it only pays off for the exceptional stones. And how often do you have exceptional stones? Well, once a year, maybe twice a year. So there is some use for the camera as well, for the iPhone camera as well, but still shots I do with the mirrorless camera. Okay, to sum everything up, light is the most important parameter. You have to invest in a couple of good, very strong lights. You have to diffuse your lights. Diffusion is most important in getting rid of all of these nasty flares and glares and reflections. DSLR or mirrorless cameras make life so much easier. No question about it. I mean, I can attach the huge monitor. I can have everything in real time. If I turn the f-stop, I see it on the monitor, the results instantaneously. If I change anything in the exposure time, I see it instantaneously. So this is really wonderful. It helps you, especially if you start to get a little bit blind like myself, so you don't see it anymore in a 4-inch screen. It looks nice, but then you blow it up and, oh, come on, it's not sharp anywhere. So this really helps. Clean your system and your setup as much as possible. I mean, there is Photoshop and all of these other photo gears that you can have for free, for example, on the internet. I can't remember the one that most people are using, sorry. There is one free one. No, sorry, don't remember it anymore. But they can help you. They can help you. You can remove all scratches out of your stones. You can help you to remove inclusions, of course. You should not do this, just to mention this. And I'm not doing it as well. But of course, you can get rid of the dust. You can get rid of fingerprints or things like this. But the less you need, the better it is and the more easy it is. So just clean everything. Try to avoid any dust particles in the air. They will settle. And as soon as you press your button, it is just there in the center of the stone. I don't know. It's called Murphy's Law, yeah. Yeah, and at the end, everything is about personal taste. I mean, you can have two different photos where you say one is wonderful, one is ugly, and people will say, oh, the ugly one is wonderful. The story behind this is when I was preparing for this talk, I said, I need to have a proof that sunlight is wonderful, but direct sunlight is absolutely a no-go for photography. So I was taking one of the stones outside, put it in the snow. First of all, it just sunk in the snow because it was too hot. It just melted the snow. So I put it on an old dry leaf, oriented it directly into the sun, and it was really the way I liked it to be. It was blurry. You couldn't see any details on this photo, except from one corner there was a flash of light. There were light rays in every direction. So I posted this photo on Facebook and said, you know, this is what you should not do. And people say, oh, it's wonderful, it's wonderful. It's a beautiful photo. Yeah, sometimes you just miss the point in what you want to transport. But as long as people like it, it has its reason, and this is the get home message for you. It's all about the personal taste. I mean, if you like your photos, it's okay. If you ask people, they will have different opinions. It doesn't mean anything else looks better to you, but maybe to them it looks better. The question, of course, is what is the purpose of your photo? If it's selling gemstones, of course, you have to go mainstream. You have to make the photos in the way that people want to see it. If you want to do artistic photos, everything is free. So this is the balance that you have to take for yourself. Do you want to be a commercial gemstone photographer, or just do you want to do it as a hobby? Do you want to fill your walls at home in your office, for example, with photos? Then everything is up to you. Yeah, this was it. Here's a couple of nice shots that I have made over the last couple of years. I realized it's getting more and more complicated to select the nice ones. So I was just trying to mix up all the colors that I have, a couple of different shapes, different materials, and trying to avoid two same colors being adjacent to each other. So this slide took me most of the time for preparation. Okay, with this, I want to thank you. I will stop here the screen sharing, and if you have any questions, just feel free to ask, and we will open up the mics, I think, Ray, if I'm correct.
Okay, that's good. You know, if I may slip in a quick question, how many f-stops do you lose when you use a polarizing filter?
Ooh, this is a good question. How many f-stops? In principle, you don't lose f-stops. You just lose the light coming in.
Okay, how much light? Yeah, because I think I really love using a polarizing filter, particularly for photographing opals,
Mhm.
because it helps focus the color patches much better. And but I found that I lose light, and that concerned me, and I didn't want to lose light because that's crucial, as we've seen, to getting a good picture. So I just want people to realize that if you use a polarizing filter, it will affect the light.
Yeah, I mean, you just have to look at the theory. If you have a polarizing filter, you block one of the either 0 or 90 degrees light sources. So you lose 50%. This is just a rough ballpark number now I'm giving you. I could measure this, of course. Uh, Maybe I'll try this. But then again, it depends on the light source that you have. If it's already polarized light or if it's, I mean, if you have a polarized light source and you use a polarizer, you can lose either nothing or 100%.
Yeah.
I assume if you have a random light source, you will lose probably 50%.
Yeah. I'd like to invite everybody, not only for questions, but if you have tricks and shortcuts that you discovered, a group brain looking at photography might not hurt. Even the experts can learn from people who've discovered things. So if you have ideas or things you'd like to contribute, or if you have a good question, please don't be shy.
Okay, Mia, I have a question. Do you have a tip for how to photograph gems with a star? Because this is always a challenge.
Okay, I was avoiding two things here. That was star gems And the other one that I was avoiding was things like opal or general everything that
Okay, yeah.
got cabochon. Because if you have a cabochon, you have one position where you have the light reflection. And if you look at the star, for example, you have to have a pinpoint light. So if you have diffused light, you're killing the star. So
Yeah.
in this case, you have to find a trade-off between having the reflection of your pinpoint light directly in the center
Mm.
and blurring of the star. So this is a little bit, you have to mix it.
Yeah.
But mixed light is always a nice try, and this is just trying to move the light. This is the only thing that I have to admit I have not really found a good solution yet, because very often I'm using a mirror here in this hand, a light source here, and then I use my toe to the camera to click the cameras. You should have maybe an assistant or two assistants or a couple of other gadgets that help you position your light sources, for example.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks a lot.
But stars definitely is one of the biggest problems that you can run into.
Okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I've got a couple questions, if you don't mind.
Sure.
Yeah, you did answer a couple for me. Thanks very much. So I'm a gem cutter as well, and recently started creating a website to sell my stones. My last cell phone just was terrible for taking photographs, and of course I'm no photographer either. I just got the Motorola Edge 2024, which has a far better camera in it, although I'm still trying to figure it out. I've got a lot of things to figure out, but a couple questions I have, for example, is like, you know, a round stone's one thing and a square stone is another, but there's a lot of shapes, and you know, how do you get the stone to stay in position, for one thing, where you want it? Especially you got to get some dust off it, whatever, and get it back into that spot. And
Yeah, okay. Getting back in the same spot is something that is almost impossible. This is why I have the movable rails. To get the stones in position, you know, I just have this piece of glass which is flat, and I mount the stone. Wait, let me just try to show this here. So we have here, this is my mobile phone, which is the surface, and then I just place the stone. Okay, it will fall down. I know it will fall down. Yep. Yeah, it will fall down.
I can see it.
I have to be careful because this is a stone I just cut for a customer. So I just put it here on the surface, and it stays. And then you use an angle with your camera.
Okay.
On top. So you can move the camera up and down, left and right, just until you find the table facet, and then you photograph. If you have to clean it, of course, you have to start the game from scratch again.
All right. Well, and you just answered my another question, because I've got a light box here, and you know, I've been taking shots from the front, but I have an option to take it from a viewport at the top. Without the diffuser, then you know, I've got the direct light on it, but it's better off taking it from the front. And yeah, actually that's you already answered the autofocus. Yeah, no, that's pretty much my question, I think. Sorry, macro or not for photographing gemstones?
I didn't talk about this. I tried many things. I started out with a small macro lens, like it was 28 millimeters. Works nicely, but then you have to move the lens approximately 1 inch, maybe 1.5 inch close to your stone. So if you have a stone like this and the lens like this, where does the light come in? Okay, doesn't help. So what you can also use is extenders, tube extenders. So it's just some hollow tubes that you put in front or actually between the body of your camera and your lens, that helps you to come closer if you have like a 28 lens or things like this. Same problem. So what I recommend is anything above 80. So I'm currently using a 105 millimeter. Sony has a 100 millimeter. Anything that's in the 100, 105 millimeter is perfect, because it gives you some working distance. For most stones, you have a working distance like 4 or 5 inches, and this is good enough to get light inside and not to create a huge head shadow head shadow, maybe to explain this, is if you look at your stone with your eyes and the light comes from the back, your head creates a shadow. So there is no light coming through your head, at least in most of the cases. We have something inside the head. Sorry. And this creates a shadow. And this is the same with the lens. So the lens is a little bit smaller, but it gets closer. And the further you stay away from your object you're photographing, the smaller your light, your head shadow will be. So this is something to take into account. And I mean, there are many lens manufacturers out there, but macro lenses are some wonderful help in this photography. You can do it with other lenses as well. I would say that 7 out of 10 people won't see the difference, but the ones who are really looking for the perfect shot, they see the difference.
Okay. I did, by the way, I bought an inexpensive tripod off of Amazon for my cell phone.
Mm-hmm.
And I found that, and it's nice and stable, believe it or not. One of the things I really like about it is it came with a little push button, so I don't have to touch my phone, which is a pain in the bum trying to keep it steady. Mm-hmm. So this, works on iPhones and Androids and all that. I found that saved me a lot of headache.
Yeah. You never try to touch directly the button on your camera on your phone, because it always creates movement.
Yeah, or changes the zoom or the size or some blasted thing, right?
Always use a remote control or anything like this to get the photos.
Yeah, and it was like I don't know, like $30 for a tripod that's probably 45 inches tall, and good and sturdy and nice and light and the whole shebang. Yeah. Thanks very much. I appreciate the questions and your seminar.
You're welcome.
Can I ask? The other thing. Oh, go ahead.
Can I ask a question? Thank you for the talk. It was really interesting. But from my point of view, I'm interested in the inclusions in the gemstones. Do you have any tips for how to get really nice pictures of stones with inclusions? I come from a geological background.
You want them with a normal setup? I mean, such a setup that we have used here, or with a microscope?
Either, really. Just any ideas that you have.
Let's start with the one that we have done today. What I always try to avoid is light from the back, because if you have a light source behind your stone, it will go through and it will enlarge each and every inclusion that you have. So in case you're interested in the inclusion, get rid of the cardboard box and put a light source behind your gem. And then you will see all, for example, needles in peridot or any crystalline inclusions in gemstone. So this will help. If we're talking about microscopes, I think this is completely different story. And Ray, maybe we should find somebody doing a seminar on this micro inclusion photography. I have a couple of names in mind.
Okay, well, think about that.
Because
possibly the Google.
I don't have any slides here now to show you the setups and things like this. And also, I mean, I am award-winning micro photographer for the GEM-A photo competition in 2022, I think, like this. But I don't really often do these photos, and there are people who do it also on a daily basis, and there's a couple of excellent people there, and I think we could have one or maybe two of them giving a talk here on Gemquest.
Okay, just one thing I'd like to bring forward, and that is that when you're using a monitor to determine your photograph, how it's going to end up, I think it's really important that we do something about calibrating the color so that it's correct. And I know there's some color calibration charts on gemdat.org, but do you have any suggestions for calibrating the correctness so you get the correct color on the monitor? Or the picture?
I prefer not to correct it.
Okay.
I mean, the camera that I'm using does most of the correction by itself. Okay. And no matter how you correct it, you will have at least one other guy calling you, are you nuts? The colors are completely strange. What's going on? I mean, I have many monitors around. I don't want to promote any brand names here, but there are one or two brands that are very expensive and they give you the perfect color. You can adjust every monitor to a color chart, but it doesn't help you because you know how the stone looks like, and it's the question how other people see the stone. And this is a problem that you cannot solve. If you have a mobile device, if you have a laptop, if you have a full screen, they all will display the colors a little bit different. So either you ask everybody to calibrate their monitors, but for me, I mean, I know that the colors on the screen that I'm using for photography are a little bit off, but I don't care about it because this monitor helps me to get everything in focus. So I don't care about the color there. The color, maybe something that I did not talk about is I'm using raw photography formats. So if you use JPEG, for example, there's a lot of changes to the photo that you're making in the background. So the software does it. The software does it to the best of its knowledge. I mean, it's today we call it artificial intelligence. It's been there all the time. But the question is sometimes, you know, even if it's a gemstone, this poor AI chip thinks it's a head or it's a face or something like this. And it uses the color settings that are somebody has programmed
to the camera,
and it looks strange. So you also have to be careful if you have automatic adjustment of your data, and therefore I'm using this raw format, and then I can adjust everything as I see it. And if you use a good camera and a good software, there's not much need for adjusting colors or temperatures or things like this.
Yeah, because some brands of camera, like Fuji, for example, will give more blues and green dominance and so on. The other question I'm hoping to throw out there, because I've had been a curse for me ever since I started trying to photograph gems, was trying to get the real greens and emeralds and the real reds and rubies. It just, whatever it is about chromium, it just seems to mess with the photographs for me anyway, and I don't know how to deal with that.
Yeah, this is one of the problems that we have to face and we have just to accept. I mean, our eyes, millions of years of evolution, and they still don't work perfectly. A camera chip, it has its limits, and it is all, for the technical guys, it's common knowledge that a detector cannot be universal. So it has its pros, for example, in the blue part of the spectrum, and the red will be seen less. It's the same. The energy is different, and therefore the impact on the sensor is different. So there are a couple of colors that you just don't get right. And
Yeah,
I have no solution to this problem. This is also, if you ask a man about a color and a woman about a color, you don't get the same results. I mean, for us men, the world is so simple. We have blue, red, and green. If I ask my wife, is this a red dress? She says, is it red? Is it fuchsia? Is it Bordeaux? Is it so many different reds? And this is proven because there's two different types of sensors in the eyes, and women have more of the one type that's able to distinguish the color. It has something to do with we were hunting and collecting, and they were taking care of some other things in the back, and this comes from evolution. And if you look at dogs or other animals, they see different parts of the light. So
yeah, true
this is
enough.
something we have to live with.
Maybe I have a little solution for this because I work with a little thing that is called color checker. I think I show it here. Can you?
From time to time, we can see it.
Yeah, color checker. Maybe the bigger one is better. It's like this.
Yep.
You can see it, and you can hold it together with with a picture you want to take, with a thing you want to take, with a person. You take one photo together with this, and then afterwards you can calibrate the colors on, for example, in Photoshop. You can you can take this the colors of this you've photographed, and then you can calibrate. There's a software for it, and it's really useful for this problem you had, Ray.
Are there any other questions or suggestions or information? Well, if not, I really want to thank you very much, Clemens, for this presentation. I think I'm going to have to do a little bit of fiddling to deal with stones that are on an angle, on a glass, on a piece of angle, so that the camera. But I think from what you're saying, you set it up so they're balanced, and then you just move the camera. So that's a trick that I had never seen before. And all the big names I've watched doing photography, you stick them and then take it out of the picture with Photoshop, and yours is more pure. So and the fact that you're photographing in RAW as well also gives a little bit more flexibility in some ways. But I think the one thing that I personally will have to master is stacking. So that's something that I still have to learn. But I'm hoping that everybody that watches this program will have gotten some tip that will help them be a better photographer. I know I have, and I thank you so much for sharing your years of experience, experimentation, and your knowledge with us, Dr. Schwarzinger. I really do appreciate it. And I would like to say that the next program that we're hoping to do in March is a pre-recorded program that was on YouTube by a very well-known gem expert by the name of Joel Aram, Dr. Joel Aram. And he's consented to allow us to use his pre-recorded program as a program in Gemquest. It may not be a perfect, it's digitally perfect program, but it will be, I think, informative. So I'm hoping that some of you will share that information with others, and we'll look forward to seeing you again the last Sunday of March. Thank you for coming out. Thank you very much, Dr. Schwarzinger, for supporting our program such as you're doing. And I want to thank, without him present, I want to thank Jolyon for the work he's done to this point. We're still trying to get all the programs we have properly archived. And when we finally get them all out and archived, we're going to be sharing them, I think, with the university in Austria, as well as possibly other organizations I'm looking into, such as the Australian Gemological Association, who are in such a different time zone, they can't really watch us live. So I think I'm hoping that this programming on Gemquest has been helpful for everybody to get that little extra bit of learning that they like to have and keep them current. And I'm glad to see all these people that are willing to share and to learn through Gemquest. I look forward to meeting you again next month. Thanks again, Dr. Schwarzinger, for supporting us and for Zooming us. And thank you all for attending.